Well, welcome McFly subscribers. Today I am going to be doing a beginner fly tying video on Hackle. By beginner, I just mean I'm going to be doing a lot of explanation that if you've tied a lot in the past and you know much about this subject, you probably will know enough that you wouldn't even need to listen. But this is more for people just getting into fly tying. One of the biggest questions I always have is, what kind of hackle do I use? So this will kind of help. I'm going to talk about the difference between saddles and necks, and I'm also going to talk the difference between wet fly hackle, which I got here, and dry fly hackle here, different birds and what they are for, different styles, what types of hackles, how you would use them, and stuff like that. So it's not going to be really in depth on how to select a dry fly hackle or how to select what kind of wet fly hackle. It's just going to kind of go through. I've got tons of hackle, way more than I got here on the table. It's only got so much that I can fit. Hackle is one of those things that is rather expensive to buy when you get into tying. So for the most part, most people are going to want to make sure they're getting the right thing when they go and make an investment. For instance, something like this is close to $100 right now. This is a mid-size pro grade, so this isn't their highest level. This is Whiting. Whiting is probably one of the most expensive brands out there, but they do make the best hackle, honestly. A lot of my hackle is Whiting because of that. It is some of the best. And in the long run, if you're going to use all the feathers, there is more tying surface on this, more feathers basically per saddle or per cape than you would get from almost any other brand, especially in the smaller sizes that you would use for like dry flies. And that's with the mid size here. These are all size, for instance, 16 and lower. But Whiting tends to be pretty expensive, so you don't want to go spending anywhere from $70 to $100 on a nice cape like this, saddle like this, and then find out it's not exactly what you wanted, right? The best thing to do, obviously, if you're going to buy is go into the shop, open up the package, look at the feathers, touch them, make sure that they are exactly what you're looking for instead of buying online. You never know what you can get online unless you have a reputable source. So best thing to do is buy in a fly shop. But let's go ahead and move forward. I'm going to start with dry fly, or what I'm going to call stiff feathers or rooster feathers, okay? So let's start off. The difference between a cape and a saddle. So basically the difference is where it comes from the bird. The cape comes from right under the neck. This would be basically right under the neck. This is the whole chest area of the bird. And almost all of these you're going to find, unless you're getting, if you're going to get like a cape, you're going to find a little patch of skin on it because that's where it keeps all the feathers on the back. If it's done well, this one's not quite as well. It's a little bit harder, not quite as soft. When you look at like Whiting, they're going to be softer, it's going to be nicer, and it's going to last longer, honestly. So this is not a Whiting. I don't know what brand this is. This was kind of in a grab bag of hackle at one show or whatever that I was at, so I just grabbed it. But the difference between that is, so this comes from the cape, this like the chest of the bird. This is going to be, both of these are going to be chickens, and rooster chickens, not hens. That's going to be different, okay? The rooster chickens are where you're going to get the longer feathers. So this would be the cape, this would be the saddle. Excuse that, my desk is a little sticky there, so it keeps on picking that up there, so it's making noise every time. So obviously you can tell there's quite a few feathers on each one of these. This probably would tie a good, anywhere, depends on the size of fly that you're tying, but if you have a wide range of different flies, you might be able to get 500 to 1,000 flies out of this. And this, quite a bit more. I mean, obviously, look at the length of the feathers, look at how many of them, and I've used quite a bit. You can see it's quite bald in the center here, where I'm pulling off some feathers. Okay, so I've used quite a few there. But these are longer, these are just as stiff for the fibers. And it's just all around, I find saddles to be easier to tie dry flies with, but that doesn't mean that these won't work. Now, the one benefit with a cape versus a saddle is, with a cape, you're going to get a wide range of feather sizes. For instance, up here, you could even get down to size like 28 hook. Some of these really small feathers, and then obviously you come to the back here, you're going to get much larger, bigger feathers. That these would be more of like what I would call schlappen, or like kind of like a strung hackle that you would get. Okay, and I'll show you that later. But these are much larger. You could use these for streamers and not even dry fly, or some really large dry flies. I mean, these are really, this would probably be like a size 2 hook or something like that. And then a wide range in between, you know. For instance, something like this is probably a size 16. Okay, man, that's probably a 14. Okay, you come a little further down, you've got, this would be a size 10 or maybe even 8. You know, you go a little further up and you can get size 16, 16, 18, 20. You know, like I said, all the way up to the very tip, and you're getting some really small, fine feathers that would be good to basically for dry fly. So you got a wide range here versus a saddle. You know, you've got a range here. I would say anywhere from, this one is probably on some of the larger feathers here, maybe a 14, and then some of the smallest, maybe an 18, even a 20 or so coming in here. And you're not a wide range. You're not going to be getting, you know, size 12s in this, and you're not going to really be getting size 20s in this, specifically this saddle. Now you could get a non-midge saddle, and you could get anywhere from 10 to 14s usually in those. Okay, it just depends on the saddle, and that's why everyone's different, and that's why it's really important to go through with your fingers, look at them, maybe with a size a gauge to see exactly what size ranges are in a cape. If you're gonna, a saddle, if you're gonna get a saddle. For a cape, pretty much all capes, most every cape is going to have a pretty wide range. That being said, though, there are different qualities of capes. Obviously, this is a little bit smaller. You can tell the different sizes between this one. This is a newer whiting cape. It's quite large. It's got quite a bit of feathers on there, quite a bit more than here. And even so, a wider range. Some of these smaller ones up here, which is, it's in the package, I don't feel like pulling it out, but some of those up there are really tiny, just like this, but you get quite a bit more of them because it's much larger of a cape. Plus the feathers are a little longer on that too, so you can, depending on the size of the dry fly, you know, you got a feather, and the same thing with the saddle, it's much longer. Let's say I pull off, I'll go ahead and pull that off. You can see the size here. So pretty much from right about there up is the surface area that you're going to be working with. You're going to be using only that. And that means you might get, depending on the dry fly, anywhere from 2 to maybe 3 flies out of that. Versus, look at the length of this saddle feather. You're going to be getting probably 10 flies out of that, possibly, depending on, of course, the fly and how heavy you're going to hackle it. You're going to get quite a few dry flies out of that. So that's something to keep in mind. These are going to be a little longer, probably 2, I would say with this one. This one's you're going to get 3 to 4 probably flies out of one of these feathers. So again, you've got a lot more, you can tie a lot more with these. So like I said, most of what I have is whiting, so that's what I'm going to be showing, but there are other brands out there. Most brands will offer different things. So for instance, this is a full-size saddle, because I use brown quite a bit. I also use grizzly quite a bit. I probably should have gotten this as a full size, but this is a bronze grade versus a pro grade. The bronze grade is a little bit longer. You can see that the feathers here are a little bit longer than the feathers here. I don't know if that's going to be in, you know, if I line it up, these go quite a bit longer. Okay, they do. And so I'm gonna get a few more ties out of each one of the feathers. So even though it's a half cape, it is a bronze. It's not going to be. It's going to tie quite a bit more per feather. So I would say I get roughly around the same out of this one versus that one. But you can do half capes, you can do full capes, you can do non-midge or, you know, regular dry fly. But most of the rooster saddles, most of them, not all, but most of the rooster saddles, especially what they call whiting dry fly, you'll see it here, it'll say dry fly. Other brands, they call it something else. But most of these saddles, they're specifically, you know, for dry fly, are going to have really good dry fly feathers. Obviously, that's what they're intended for. But not all rooster feathers are created equal. For instance, this is a saddle. And it's a rooster saddle. But this, I think, I could be wrong, this is either a Whiting American saddle, which I'm not sure. I have one here that is a different one from Whiting. I believe this is a Whiting rooster, but I got this in a grab bag, but I think it's an American saddle. If it's not, then it's one of the Kosh, I think it's called. There's another brand called Kosh, and they make a little bit wider feathers. So as you can see here, there's a couple here that could work for a dry fly. They're really smaller, and this could be a dry fly. The only thing is these fibers are a little softer than I would like to see for a really good dry fly. It'll work, but you're not going to get it to, it's going to soak up water a little bit easier because they're not quite as stiff as some of the others. But you can see that these are wider feathers. These are really good, by the way. I like this saddle. I use it a lot for tails on streamers or collars on streamers because, again, the fiber's stiff enough but not overly stiff. It's not going to cause the fly to sit on the top like a dry fly would. Of course, then you've got some other feathers mixed in. These are really webby. You can see they don't stick out. Really webby. So these are really good for collars on flies because it's webby. So depending on from where on the saddle, you've got a different range for some reason on the saddle, different range of different size flies. And I find the Whiting American and also the Kosh both do that. They have some smaller, finer feathers and some longer feathers, but it's a beautiful saddle here. And I've used it quite a bit. You can see a bunch of feathers missing, but I really like that. Again, for not for dry fly, but for streamers. But if you're going back to dry fly, most of Whiting, what I would say that their big thing is going to be dry fly. So let's talk about the saddles again. You've got a wide range of different things. You can get half saddles. You can get quarter saddles. They're really small. You can get what they call 100 packs. There's enough feathers here to tie 100 flies. I would say maybe even more than 100 flies, but at least 100 flies depending on what flies you're tying. But it's all pretty pricey. You can see here, they're more expensive now. I got this, a couple years ago and it was $17.95. I mean, these little packs will probably cost about $20, $25 now. But what's nice is if you know you've got to tie size 14 flies, well, and this color, you buy this and you can go ahead and tie 20 in this, if you're looking for Hackle this color specifically, and you're tying a bunch of size 14, I will say this will range from close to 16 and close to maybe 12. It'll be a range in between, but generally it's going to be good for size 14. So you can get away with some size 12s and size 16s on this. Same thing with this one. It's size 18. You can get away with some size 20s and some size 16s, but the rough, the average one here is going to be a size 18 in here. So just keep that in mind. There's some options there if you're going to do dry fly. Okay, same thing with capes. If you're looking for something more of a wider range, you can do half capes. They have half capes. Whiting sells them. I know some other brands sell them. They sell half capes. So that's a good bet. If you didn't want to go buy a whole cape, you can do a quarter cape, or I'm sorry, half cape, and then have a wide range if you're not going to tie a ton of flies. These are an interesting product that I had gotten. There's a website that sells them. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to name the website because I didn't have a great experience with their customer service. But I know some people are happy with them. So, but I don't necessarily want to send you guys to a place and have you guys get bad customer service as well. But I think a couple places do offer this where they're necks. So what they're doing, if you look, it's pretty much the same thing as this. What they're doing is they're just cutting off the top here for people that want to tie some really small flies. So these are a whole bunch of size, 20, 22, maybe even up to 26 or smaller. A whole bunch of little feathers for that. Okay, so if you wanted to do that, you could do that if you're just tying a whole bunch of smaller flies. They also sell the bottom sections of capes. I've seen at some places as well. So there's some other options between, for the dry fly. Now, let's move into something I would say is more for streamer style flies. American Hackle. The rooster capes, as you can see, the feathers, and I gotta take this out for you guys to see. These feathers are much wider. You can tell. They're not dry fly feathers. These, even though if you get up small up here, you might be able to get, I mean, those are still really, like I said, American saddle, American feathers, the Whiting American brand tend to be webbier, and I believe that's what this is. Like I said, it's that or Kosh, which is similar with Kosh. But these are, like I said, much wider. This is a rooster. It's not a hen, but it's a rooster, and it's, you know, they're too wide, I would say, for dry fly. But this works really good for stiffer tails, or, you know, if you want a stiff collar on a fly. I use this a lot for poppers, like popper tails, or the collars behind the popper head. Woolly buggers this will work for. Some of the smaller feathers up here work for a woolly bugger if you want a stiff woolly bugger. Okay, stiff hackle woolly bugger. They also sell not just capes. If you don't want a whole cape, they have little packs as well with Whiting. And again, I'm not trying to promote Whiting. They're not sponsoring this. It's just that's what I have the most of. I do have some other brands as well, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this is just kind of what other brands also sell different types of packs as well. And I don't have everything in the world here. That would cost a fortune to have. I just get what I need for my own tying. Okay, so this is a Whiting, what they call bugger pack. It's made to be for woolly buggers specifically, but I generally do not use this for woolly buggers. I have, but I use it for a whole bunch of stuff. It is a great thing for kind of if you're looking for some of those bigger, webbier feathers, but from a rooster where it's still got some stiffness to it. There's some smaller ones here as well that are good for smaller. In fact, you could even use some of these for dry fly. They're pretty stiff. You know, so there's two pieces, basically. It's a smaller section and a heavier section. So some bigger buggers, some smaller buggers. You could tie, you can see, you know, some webbier, some not so web. Wide range of different flies, but I use these for collars. The same thing I use this for tails and for collars for flies. For streamers and stuff like that, bass streamers, saltwater stuff. I use this a lot, but again, you could use it for woolly buggers as well, what it's intended for. Similar here, these are what are called the streamer packs, the Whiting streamer packs. Similar to this, it's a pack, 2 different swatches. One of the swatches is going to have some shorter feathers, one is going to have longer feathers, but it's just, these aren't that expensive either. These, I think, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say they're under $10. You get quite a few, as you can see, quite a few feathers. Some of them are unusable. You can see a couple of them with broken tips, but for the most part, they're pretty good quality. And these I use a lot for like deceiver tails. Same thing with these and these. They work great for deceiver tails, but that's what I use these for mostly. But I mean, there's other uses as well. Now I will say between that and you can tell this, these are a little finer. You can almost see through the feather. The feather, the fibers on the feather are going to be a little stiffer, but they're not going to, you know, take up. They're not going to, you know, they're kind of see-through. As you can see on one of these, they're not see-through at all. I mean, even these are a little bit see-through because there's a little bit more web to the feather. So I wouldn't say these would ever really work for like a dry fly ever, even one of the smaller ones, because it's too webby. It's just it's not stiff enough. But it gives you a nice look on the tail because it's not super see-through, right? It's opaque, so it's going to actually, you know, actually be substance there. And that would be like Whiting's version of what I would call like strung saddle hackle, or Chinese strung saddle hackle. You can tell these are a little webbier, not quite as see-through. These ones are specifically, there's a couple feathers in here that aren't. There we go. But this is what I would call like these are really good. These are kind of what most people use for like deceivers. They're inexpensive. You can get these for pretty inexpensive. And there's quite a few feathers here. They're just strung, so they're picked off and then they're re-strung together to create, you know, basically its own cape in a way. But these work really good. You just pull one off and then there you go. You've got yourself a little tail, and they're great for tails. They're also really good for like if you want more of a webby collar on a fly, like a streamer, that'll work. There's quite a few uses for strung Chinese saddle hackle, but like I said, that's what I use this for as well. So just kind of depends. I would say these are a little softer. The stems on these are a little stiffer, at least in my experience. So keep that in mind as well. Those won't move as much in the water, and these will move more. However, when a feather stem is really soft, every once in a while you could have potentially the chance of that wrapping around the hook point and fouling up on the hook if you don't properly tie it in. So something a little stiffer will keep that from happening. That'll almost never happen with something a little stiffer. So there's different uses for different stiffness of the feather stem, okay? And very similar to those, strung saddle hackle is going to be schlappen. Now there's a bunch of different forms of schlappen. This is, again, more webby than this, I would say, than strung Chinese saddle hackle. But again, not all are the same, so you might find some more webby. I would say they're really in between. I would say the only difference between schlappen and this considered, I mean, they kind of blur the lines between each other. Some of the schlappen is going to be a little longer, a little bit more webby, and some of this might be a little less, a little bit shorter. But I would say mostly it's just kind of generally schlappen is going to be a little thicker, a little more webby, and a little longer feathers. But they're coming from roughly the same areas of the bird, I believe. Okay, now granted, I don't work for whiting, I don't work for any of these companies, and I don't raise chickens, so I don't really know. I just know from what I gather, okay? So, but you can tell that these are a little bit longer. There's a lot, in schlappen usually there's a lot of this like marabou looking material right under it. So these work really good for tails as well. Great for collars on flies, or kind of bodies on if you wanted like a big streamer with a big, you know, webby body. Those work really well for those. Here's a bag of whiting schlappen. You can tell the difference in size. So this was what, $6.49 it says at a fly shop. I would say you can get these for like $10 roughly. I don't know exactly, but I think that's roughly what it is. But you're getting quite a few more feathers, and a lot of these you can tell are much longer. I mean, that is a much bigger feather, but it's different. The schlappen that you get in the bag from whiting tends to be, these are a little softer, these are more stiff. So it just depends on what you're looking for. These are still webby. They're gonna, some of them are gonna stick together and whatnot, but they're just more heavy duty. I would say this would be what I would use for some saltwater flies. Of course, some freshwater as well. But if I was gonna build like a hackle body on a big streamer, I would go with something like this, because it's going to be just a little more heavy duty than that, withstand a few more fish strikes. Of course, you've got some cheaper stuff that you can get at different places. This is obviously from Cabela's. This is a strung neck hackle, so this would be basically strung from like something like that. Actually, that's going to be more dry fly. It's going to be strung from a cape neck, basically same thing, is going to be strung from something like that. So it's just basically a couple feathers. You can do something like that if you specifically are looking for a size. Generally these are all going to be similar sizes. It's not going to be a wide range like you would get from this. Okay, and then of course here we've got an Indian rooster saddle patch. You can also get these strung like you would with the Chinese rooster. The difference between Indian and Chinese is very small. It's not a big difference, but specifically with this one at least, you can tell that these are a little bit thinner, a little bit finer feathers versus webbier. I don't know if that has to do with, you know, where they're getting these from the bird, but I mean, you can get some thicker ones, but as you can see, these do taper off to a point more so. They are a little bit finer and a little softer of a stem, I would say. At least in my experience with these and other Indian saddle that I've gotten. And then again, with the Chinese, they tend to be, the Chinese saddle, it tends to be a little heavier of a stem, not quite as soft. So, you know, but these tend to cost a little bit more. The Chinese saddle is probably some of the cheapest options you can get for tails on streamers, okay? All right, so let's move forward to soft hackle. We did touch a little bit on some of this. I would call some of this soft hackle a little bit. We're kind of blurring the line there. This could be considered soft hackle, but we're still kind of in the realm of, I mean, it's not, some of this isn't, and obviously all this isn't dry fly hackle, but, you know, kind of blur the line between that stiff and the soft. But now we're moving into, I'm going to move into hen saddle, which is going to be, all of hen saddle is going to be more what you would call soft hackle. All right, guys, so here is some hen saddle. And actually, this is actually rooster, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I apologize in the background here. Of course, whenever I start trying to film, I've got people doing gardening outside. I appreciate all that they do, but it is really loud with those leaf blowers. So I'm sorry if you can hear it, if it's being picked up in the video, but let's move forward. So this is going to be hen saddle, as you can see. This all says hen saddle. Well, that says whole saddle, but it is a hen saddle. American saddle, which I touched on. They tend to be wider, heavier feathers. Again, hen is going to be webbier. It's going to be wider. They're not rooster. Rooster, as you can see, and here's a good example. Most rooster feathers tend to be stiffer fibers. They tend to be longer feathers. Okay, and hen tends to be a little shorter feathers. They're just not, they don't have the length that the rooster does, and definitely not the stiffness. I would call what these are is more webby, which you want for a soft hackle. So as you can see, that's a feather, and this would be considered a long feather for a rooster, or I'm sorry, for a hen feather. These are the whiting red label. Okay, so that's what you're getting, you know, from some of these dry flies. You can tell that, you know, the birds are bred to have really long feathers. Okay, so even with the hen, you're still going to get a couple longer feathers. You know, it's still going to be longer than some other brand, some other, you know, basically types of chickens, but you can tell that they're much webbier. Okay, they don't want to stick together. They're softer. These are definitely not going to hold up a dry fly, but they're made for collars. They're made for soft hackle. You can even, some of these smaller ones work for nymphs. You know, like collars on nymphs, really good for like prince nymphs and stuff like that. That's these. I use this a lot for some small game changers. They work really well for that. But generally, I would say the red label whitings are going to be more for smaller. Obviously, they're smaller feathers. They're going to be made for smaller soft hackle type of feathers. Okay, so this would be Whiting's American label, or American hen saddle. And you can tell that these are a little longer, obviously, a little bigger of a feather, but they're also much wider. You know, that's going to be the biggest one there, and that's the biggest one there. It's much bigger feather. These are, again, they're much bigger. These are really more for saltwater or bass or anything like that. Beautiful pink color on this one, but this is going to be kind of blurring the line of that schlappen and like a soft hackle. Okay, but like anything, schlappen tends to come from rooster. These are going to be even softer. The stems are really soft. These move a lot, so if you're going to use this as a tail, that's going to be a really nice moving tail. If you're going to use it as soft hackle collar, it's going to be really soft feathers that are just going to move a lot. Kind of almost blurring that line between marabou and, you know, like a feather. Marabou is a feather, but you know what I mean, a hen feather. Okay, so now this is something, this is actually a whiting as well, but this is called a Brahma. Okay, you can tell that the feathers are rounded. They're not pointed like some of these. They're much more rounded. They're softer, and they're just smaller little feathers. There's still some webbiness to them, and the fibers themselves are semi-long. Like, you're not going to get as small or as short of fibers as some of the ones on the wet fly hackle here from whiting. You're going to get, these are, even the smallest of the feathers are going to be pretty long fibers. You know, you can go even longer if you get here. There is a little bit of a range, okay? But this is a Brahma saddle with what they call chickaboo. And this is basically marabou from a chicken. So they're really short little, I'm going to pull one off here. You can see really short little, basically feather, but it's marabou. I mean, you can see I'm blowing on it and it's just any movement. That moves really well. Any kind of breeze or water, water movement, that's going to just make a lot of movement. That's marabou. And that can actually be used as well as a hackle. You could actually even wind that on and make like a marabou collar if you wanted. You could do that with marabou. People do that. So really, pretty much, hackle is any feather, really. It's just feather. I think it's another term for feather, but generally what we use them for are different ways, right? Different properties to a feather are going to cause different things. But I really like these for creating like bodies. There's something called a soft hackle bugger, I believe it's called. Brahma bugger, some people call it, because it's a Brahma hen. And they use these basically to wind around. It makes a really soft, flowing body. They use this for the tail. And it's a lot of movement on those flies. Really good flies. But that's Brahma. You can just tell the difference, though, between that saddle and this saddle. You get a lot more feathers from this than you would this. Is smaller. But these are just different, and they're modeled. If you look at the color, it's like speckled, which is really nice actually for if you had some larger nymphs that you wanted to make collars on, that would work as well because that modeled look. Here's another Brahma. This is hen. Generally, the Brahma, at least from whiting, is all going to be hen. I haven't seen any rooster Brahma. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's unusable for whatever. But the necks, for some reason, tend to be a little bit longer feathers and not as short. Here's some saddle feather with it. So you could get a hen neck if you didn't want the marabou with it or the chickaboo with it. You could actually get the neck and you get both the saddle and the neck feathers. They're a little bit different. These tend to be a little less webby and a little longer. This I would use for, you can tell here, and there's some really fine small little feathers. Those would be great for really small soft hackle collars, or collars on nymphs and stuff like that. And then you can get some larger feathers here. That would be more for like collars on even streamers or really large nymphs. Same thing with that. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about some other brands here. We've got Metz. Metz has made hackle for a long time as well as whiting. It makes some really good hackle, but it's just not the same. Here's a neck. Okay, this is what you would call a soft hackle neck. It's a hen saddle, or a hen neck, sorry, not saddle, hen neck. These, you can tell there's some points to it because it is a neck. So some, but these will work great as nymph collars. You can tell the size of that neck there versus what you get from whiting. Okay, here's one. This isn't the same brand, I'm sorry, or same type of chicken. This is whiting though, you can tell, but most of the whiting necks, even the rooster, are going to be longer like this, bigger. You're going to get more more feathers. This is just much smaller. You get a lot less feathers. For almost everything I use whiting. It's just a much higher quality feather. That doesn't mean that it's bad though. These can definitely be used. Nothing wrong with them. These I would use for, like I said, collars on nymphs is pretty much all I would use this for. I would say this is more too see-through and too pointed to be really good for wings on dry flies. Okay, just for my own use. If I was going to do wings on dry flies, I would actually rather use something like this. It's a little rounder. You can get some of these smaller ones here that work well for that. Even this would be better. You'll see in a minute. They're a little less wispy. You're not going to see through them as much. There's some other options like that from whiting, or even, like this is a just off-brand from J. Stockard. Cheap. I don't think this costs very much money. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention, it's not like these are less expensive. I think this costs like $30, $40. And for a hen neck, that's pricey. I mean, I think these Brahmas are right around the same price. I don't think they're much less, or much, you know, this isn't much less expensive, and you just get so much more. So keep that in mind as well. In my humble opinion, I don't really know if Metz is really worth it unless you get some good deal on them. So that brings me into, since I was talking about it, here we go. You can get, these are both from J. Stockard, but there's some companies out there that you can buy them. They're just basically little patches of saddles, or you can even get necks, just cheap soft hackle necks. They work fine. These two, I like them for, like I said, dry fly wings, dry fly hackle wings. Let me pull this out so you can see what I mean. You can get one of these smaller feathers here, and once you pull back that, now you've got like a little wing. Let me get some, and that's not super see-through like the other. The tip was like you didn't see it. Once you just pulled back the tip, you need 2 or 3 of them for it to show anything. So that leaves a really nice little wing on a dry fly, and also being more opaque, they're good for collars on flies and stuff. I would say similar to whatever use I would use this for. You could use this definitely, because a little bit shorter, a little more rounded tips, I would say very similar to the Brahma. So you could do these, and these are cheap. I don't remember exactly, but I remember them being way less expensive than almost any saddle or stuff anywhere else. And it doesn't have to be from J. Stockard. Get them elsewhere. I think there's a bunch of, I want to say Risen even sells some like this, okay, that are great for that kind of use. Again, soft hackle, collars on flies, those would work just fine. Similar to the Brahma here, there's a Coq de Leon, which is very similar to this. Well, it's the same breed of bird as this. This is CDL as well. But this is a tailing pack, so it's a rooster. Long fibers, but like you see mottled, and it's pretty stiff as well. So it makes for a really good tail. But if you had like a really big collar, and you wanted it with some mottled look, you could actually tie a pretty big collar in with these as well. So you could use the CDL rooster kind of as a collar or soft hackle. Definitely, probably more of a collar, not really soft hackle. This would be their hen. So this is CDL hen, and you can tell wide range. This is the cape, and also it comes with some saddle as well. So obviously, like always, saddle is going to be a little more webbier, a little bit softer, okay? And you can tell that's less opaque, it's more webby, versus this is a little bit stiffer. But these make great collars on wet flies, and also on streamers. If you wanted something a little larger, I mean, that's a cool look because it's so mottled. It's got like a buggy look to it. So, and even streamers, I mean, fish tend to have mottled looks to them as well. So if you just wanted that look, CDL is really nice, and you can get some smaller stuff up here. Definitely not for this, it wouldn't be dry fly. Here's another American saddle. That's one nice thing about Whiting's American is a couple of their birds have this black like lace edge to it, which looks really nice. So then they can dye it and have like a really cool look. Imagine a collar with that. That would just look really cool. Or you can even tie like a woolly bugger with that if you want a soft hackle woolly bugger. Just cool looking stuff. They come in a couple of different colors. I just want to show you that. I thought it was pretty cool. But I've not seen that on any other brand other than Whiting. Let me know in the comments section if you have, but I have not. I think it's just really cool. Ugh. Sorry, I just ripped up some stickers that were there, and I need some Goo Gone, I guess. Anyway, well, okay, so we've got here a Whiting hen cape. Okay, so this we had talked just a minute about the hen saddle. This is a hen cape, and sorry I didn't bring that up during the same time. I wanted them side by side, but you can tell that the feathers are a little bit longer. This is the red label, a little bit longer. These are great for nymph collars. In fact, you could, with one feather like this, you could tie probably 3 or 4, yeah, at least 2, definitely probably 3 different collars on nymphs, like Prince Nymph, okay? That will work great. That's why I actually have this one. This is for, I use it for Prince Nymphs a lot, okay? Nice brown color. They also sell them in other colors as well, but you could even use some of the bigger ones here for like a woolly bugger, okay? If you wanted something with a little bit softer, still a little bit stiff, but soft, kind of softer, you could use it for that, like smaller streamers, even tails for streamers. You could even use some of the feathers down here for that. But that's a cape. Same thing as all capes. You've got smaller feathers to longer feathers. The difference with this and like a rooster is this is going to be softer fiber, so you wouldn't want to use this for a dry fly, okay? It will not hold the dry fly up. It will soak up water. It's webby. So now let's get into some other feathers that can be used. Really, you don't have to just use chicken, which is pretty much all we've been talking about here. So we've got, this is pheasant, okay? And there's a couple different colors of pheasant. This is not a really well done one. This is, it still has salt all over it, but it was inexpensive, but beautiful feathers. You can tell there's some, you know, really beautiful color to them. Different colors. You got some purpley color ones there, some blue, some greenish. Really nice. And these can be used, you know, for a bunch of different things, but you could definitely still use them as like a collar on a nymph if you had a bigger nymph. You could use it, you know, as accents, but you could still kind of use this as what you could traditionally call a hackle. Okay, definitely not a dry fly hackle. This would all be soft hackle. Okay. But a lot of soft hackle nymphs use stuff like this, where basically the whole front end is wrapped with a pheasant tail or a partridge. Okay, these are mottled, really nice looking feathers, and those work as well. Very similar feather to the pheasant, just in a different kind of coloration. Mallard feathers. These on really large flies, because these are really long fibers, but you could use that for if you wanted a nice you know, mottled look to it. Bunch of little speckles all over it. It'd be really nice on a larger collar on the fly. Even CDC, I've seen people wrap CDC around to make a collar, okay? That can be used. That's considered a hackle. If you wanted something really small, this is a starling. I mean, again, the list goes on and on. It's not just this. What I've got here, there's a bunch of different types of feathers that you could use. I just grabbed like a sample of a couple, but really small. You can tell these are black. They're dark color. They've got a nice iridescent shine to them, but these starlings makes for some really nice soft hackle nymphs. Okay, definitely not streamer. They're too small, but yeah, there we go, guys. I mean, that's all I pulled out so far right now. I have a lot of hackle, but it would be crazy to show you everything I've got and all the different colors and whatnot, but that gives a rough kind of overview of different types of hackles, what you use them for. Sorry I didn't show many examples of it being used, but I think you guys can kind of get the picture. I know I'll get a lot of questions on what kind of hackle to use. Hey, do I use a saddle? Do I use a cape? I mean, you know, and it's I understand, because when I first started, I had no clue any of this. So I hope this helped, especially some, you know, people just starting off. I think over time, in the next little bit, I'll try to make some videos more dedicated to dry fly hackle and what to use, or soft hackle and what to use, you know, maybe like nymph, you know, for nymphs, or maybe some specifically for streamers and the different types and why you'd want this versus, you know, this or whatever, that kind of thing. So I think I'll try to go in a little more depth there, but I hope this helped. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I'm happy to try to answer everything I can. I also sell flies, so if you have any specifics on what you're looking for, let me know. It's custom, so I pretty much can tie anything out there. Just let me know. Best way to reach me is through Instagram. So find me on Instagram, McFly Angler is the handle on there, and go ahead and leave me a message. I'm happy to try to answer any questions or sell you some flies if you need them. So anyway, I will see you guys on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.